What's up, fam? It's Pablo here. I want to talk to you quickly about the lodge that I'm running in Ixcalac, Mexico, which is right on the border with Belize. If you're thinking about getting into saltwater fishing or you really want to up your game, I highly recommend Ixcalac Paradise Fly Fishing Lodge. It's one of the few places where you can go and have lots of shots at multiple species. Tarpon, bonefish, permit, barracuda, jacks, snook, you name it. And all those species are found within 10 to 30 minutes of the boat launch, which means you're not wasting your time and your money getting to the fishing spot. If you're interested in booking a saltwater trip, send me an email at pablo@criollo, CRIOLLO, campoutfitters.com. That's pablo@criollo, campoutfitters.com. And let's set something up. Mention the podcast and get 10% off your trip. Yo, I'm Pablo.
And this is Lance, and you're listening to
the Noob and the Knower Fly Fishing Podcast. In this podcast, we pair a driven angler with a seasoned professional to take you from total noob to a fly fishing nerd.
Yeah, we cover reading water, gear, fishing techniques, and much, much more.
With Mr. Lance Egan, star of hit video series Modern Nymphing, Fly Fishing Team USA medalist, and professional guide.
That's right, and here co-hosting, asking the questions on your behalf, is avid fly fisher and outfitter owner Pablo Signori.
So now, let's hit the water. Fish on!
Fish on!
The Noob and the Knower podcast. I'm trying to change the way I start our episodes because I get annoyed that I start them the same every time. So that was my newest variation there for you.
I like it. Mixing it up.
Exactly. Welcome, listeners. Thanks for tuning into the show. We appreciate it. We sort of cheated and tried to use someone else's podcast to fill in our podcast season, which was that one that when it came out with Wet Fly Swing. But then, because I was thinking that would be a bonus episode, but then I realized that we never actually released it. Doesn't really count. So now we have to fill that one in also.
Very good.
So anyhow, today we have Stream Entomology. We're basically going to try and make what is equivalent to like a field guide to the hatches in an episode. So if you're smart, you could actually take this episode, put it inside an AI, and have it spit out an outline for you. And in theory, it should work. But we're not saying you should do that. So we're going to try and get through it systematically in a way that will be useful to you while you're driving to go on the stream.
And full disclosure, neither of us, we need to get this out right out of the gates, neither of us, full disclosure, are entomologists.
Speak for yourself.
Sorry, I am not an entomologist. We understand what's going on. We know some of the bugs. We know a little bit about them, but we certainly don't know we can't tell you how many thoracic segments a Beta have or how many gills they have and that kind of stuff. I can tell you what a blue-winged olive nymph is compared to a green drake or compared to a stonefly, but we are not entomologists, so take what we're about to share with you as kind of a rough Cliff Notes guide, if you will, of what we think you should know to be effective on the water.
Yeah, it's like the fisherman's guide to entomology. So yeah, no, I'm not an expert either. Actually, I know very little, which is why I wanted to do this podcast, because I feel like the best way to sort of break through the next ceiling is to actually learn the bugs, which of course I know what they sort of look like, but I can't tell the difference between many mayflies. You know, I think like Hexagenia, if I see that one, I know it really well. A green drake maybe, but like other than that, it's all kind of up in the air. And most of these I know just from books. I haven't even seen them on the river sometimes. So it will be cool to kind of get like just a little system going that makes it easier for you to know what you're doing on the river. And we haven't really covered entomology fully. We did it, I can't remember when we did it, but we did it in a very overview fashion. This time we're going to get a little bit deeper and make it practical for you. So hopefully by the end of the show, you'll have sort of like a mental flow chart of season, bug order, life stage, and fly. A field guide in your head that will somehow, through osmosis, will seep into your neural network and make you smarter about bugs. Work with me here, Lance.
I like it.
So yeah, we're going to be covering bugs today. Obviously, it's important to know what trout are eating. Trout eat bugs. Why do you think it's important actually to know them a little bit deeper than just picking a random bug out of your box and or even just matching the hatch in a way, size, shape, color?
I think there's lots of factors there. One is just being prepared, having just a basic knowledge of what insects could be in the cards for any given time of day or time of year would help you, prepare your fly selection before you ever get to the river. That said, I've been doing this for a long, long time, and you still encounter hatches or sizes or slight color variations of things that I've never seen before, right? So you're never going to be completely prepared, which is part of the fun. But I think it's important to understand a little bit about the insects themselves, what they are doing, why they're where they are, help you understand water types to focus in on, to understand when they're going to hatch, what happens while they hatch that could give you clues as to what you're seeing the fish do or not do, or water types you find fish in, or best times of the day to fish, and on and on and on, in addition to just having your fly selection kind of dialed in for any particular time of year or waterway.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I think also like the last 2 years I have in my noobness have sort of changed my perspective on things also, just because I've been in situations that have been very specific that have forced me to think past just like the general knowledge. So I'll give you an example. For a long time, all I did was put on, my favorite Euro nymphs and I would catch a bunch of fish. But then once I started switching to more dry fly fishing, things got a little bit more complicated. And even I went out my first, it's like my first day out in the driftless fishing for trout. Really, I was just taking a buddy of mine out to fish. And I noticed that there was a huge like ball of insects kind of over by these logs that were in the middle of the river. So I waded over to it and I started looking at them. They were pretty small. And I quickly realized that they were midges. Now, it was really early season. It was really cold out. The water was very cold. Probably most people wouldn't have thought to fish dry fly, but I've seen these flying midges. And so I opened my box, I switched to my dry fly rod, put on a midge pattern, fished it actually downstream, and I caught a fish on a dry. And
very cool.
I think that was like a major unlocking moment for me where I was like, okay, like clearly I have learned something, and putting the time in to like learn these things has helped me on the river, where had I not had that knowledge, I probably would have just looked at it, been like, I have no idea what this is. Maybe tried to match the hatch, but probably been like, yeah, it's not going to work. Like clearly there's no risers. I'm not seeing any risers anywhere, So I think that it's a good way to sort of continue growing, which is why we decided to do a whole segment on it.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, obviously you can go and have success fishing and catch fish without knowing anything at all really about entomology. There's plenty of fly patterns out there that are not really specific to any particular insect, just attractors, and they work, right? But I think my guess is that most people taking the time to listen to a fly fishing podcast are taking it a step beyond that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm generalizing here, but most people that are going to fish 1 or 2 times a year and just throw whatever yellow bug or black bug they see in their box, they're not going to be seeking out podcasts on entomology on the internet. So I think it's worthwhile it's worthwhile for our listeners' sake I like what you said. It's just going to help benefit your fishing. It could catch you a few extra fish, help you understand what's going on. And there's also some fun in kind of, I remember being a younger angler and having kind of experiencing some of my first hatches where I've read about them. I've seen pictures of them in books or magazines. And then you're actually on the river and like, these mayflies or caddis or stoneflies or whatever the hatch is happens, and you're there experiencing everything that you've read or everything that you've heard about, and it's kind of it's almost like a coming of age moment. Like you checked a box, you're becoming a legit fly fisher now, right? I fished a hatch. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And the first few times you see fish actually coming to the surface and taking those flies off the surface, it's just kind of a oh wow moment. I think anyway, it was for me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. On
still
that.
Is.
Yeah.
We just had a film event at Fly Fish Food with Gilbert Rowley and Phil Tuttle of their buffet series, which is amazing stuff on YouTube if our listeners haven't checked it out. And they had some of the coolest footage of. I mean, they had everything from saltwater stuff to the jungle stuff, but they also had crazy cool footage of just like fish eating hoppers and fish eating brown drakes and on and on. It's just so much fun watching a fish come up and confidently taking a hatching insect right off the surface.
That's so cool. The big picture here is that we have 4 categories of bugs that we're going to cover, and we might dip into some other sort of offshoots and stuff, but there's like 4 main categories, and there's like 3 lifestyles. Not all of them have a complete life, but we'll get to that in a second. So we're covering mayflies, we're covering caddisflies, we're covering stoneflies, and we're covering midges. Not in any order of importance, by the way, but those are kind of where we're going. So let's start with mayfly, sort of the darling of the trout fishermen.
darling.
Tell us a little bit about mayflies, maybe the 3 stages that matter in their life, and then a little bit about how they look, maybe their mating rituals. Talk to me about this.
So maybe a little bit about the way they look. They're often described as little sailboats. So the duns, at least the adult duns, have a upright wing that looks like a sail. They usually have split tails, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 tails. They're generally very slender, kind of dainty looking flies.
Their body kind of like
elongated,
curves like a, I don't know, like a runt candy.
A runt, like a runt banana.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. Yeah, they have kind of a slight curve to their body oftentimes. The adults can have very bulbous eyes. But yeah, the stages that matter, as you put it, the nymph, the emerger, the dun, and the spinner. The nymph and emerger and mayflies are basically one and the same. So that's just kind of one stage.
The nymph and emerger, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah, because mayflies do not have complete metamorphosis. They have an egg, a nymph, and an adult. Basically, they don't have a pupal stage like a caddis or a midge would have.
Okay.
So mayflies, yeah, nymph and emerger. We get this question in the shop a lot. Well, what do I fish for a blue-wing olive or a PMD or a green drake emerger? And you're like, well,
those are all mayflies.
Those are all mayflies. You use the nymph.
Yeah.
And they look at you like, but I want to fish it right below the surface. And you're like, yes, exactly. On the flip side, sometimes when people come in and say, I'm going to head to the river, what should I use? And one of the questions I ask, oftentimes qualifying question, is how do you plan to fish? And if they say like, I'm going to indicator nymph, let's say, then sometimes I suggest an emerger based on the name of the fly, like a bar emerger, let's say. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, I want to fish it near the bottom. And you're like, right, you do. Mm-hmm. That is exactly correct. But they're saying it like, like I'm up in the night, they want to fish near the bottom, and I'm suggesting emerger. And the interesting thing about mayflies is the nymph and the emerger. The emerger is basically the nymph that goes from the bottom of the river and swims to the surface.
Right.
The nymph and emerger is one and the same. Now, the one catch here, the one caveat is that you could also fish dry fly style patterns that are emergers, kind of stuck in the film. I would also classify those as emergers. So they would look a little bit different, but let's call them cripples, or let's call them like a sparkle dun, where it kind of has the trailing shucks stuck in half in, half out, half in the water, and then the adult mayflies hatching out of it. So that could also be fished as some sort of an emerger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of them get stuck that way. That's why they call them cripples. But yeah, and then we have the duns that are the winged insect, and then the final countdown, as Europe calls it, the spinner.
Nice. That's not going to get flagged because we split it apart.
Nice. The spinner is when after they've hatched into adults, they've usually mated, and then they're laying flat on the water, ready to die. Instead of an upright wing, the wings are down, spent to the side. Sometimes they change colors, the mayflies at that time. The wings almost always do. They usually go from kind of more opaque to more transparent looking wings.
Why do they call them spinners? Because they like spin when they fall?
They don't really spin when they fall. I think they call them spinners because they lay spent, I guess, on the water is how I would call it.
So they're spenters.
They're out of energy and they fall to the water's surface. And when they're done, their wings are upright. As the spinner, they're outright, almost like outriggers laying to either side. Yeah, the two wings are laying flat on the surface. I think we might call them spinners because if you tie, this is a joke, but because if you tie a spinner with too much wing, it will spin up your leader. That's not really why they call them spinners, but that's a funny one. But yeah, that does happen. If you have 6 or 7 X-tippet in a pretty, obese wing, let's call it, too much material for a wing, it can spin up your leader. Mm-hmm. It can be a spinner. not to be mistaken with a MEPS.
Oh, fair. Fair. I guess we should
Mep's
mention the Latin name of a mayfly. We don't have to go into subgenus or anything like that, but
Thank goodness, because I don't know them all.
yeah, so it's so mayfly, just the genus itself, and there's many different types. So that if you have many types, you would have more than just one name. But Ephemeroptera. How would you say that?
Ephemeroptera.
Ephemeroptera. Yes, it means living a day in Latin.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that, which is interesting because mayflies often do just live, a day or two as an adult. They don't have a long life.
Mm-hmm. It's all interesting.
That is interesting. One thing that's cool about mayflies is, well, it's I guess common mayflies and not all of them, but many mayflies and many caddisflies are just on 1-year life cycles. So like when the green drakes hatch, you don't have, when most of them have hatched, like on my local waters, let's call it late June through early July, most of the green drakes have hatched. And so you have mayflies, you have tiny little drake nymphs in the system, I suppose, a week or two later after those eggs hatch, but they're microscopic, right? So they grow all year long to get to their adult, I shouldn't say their adult, to get to their largest instar, their largest nymph size, but just on a 1-year cycle. With mayflies and caddisflies, generally, I can't speak to all the species because I don't know enough to say for sure that all the species, but I think most mayflies and caddisflies are on 1-year life cycles.
Okay.
Stoneflies, not so much. Midges, some of them are, and I think some of them can have multiple broods in just a season, I believe.
Yeah, and I think
Anyway.
like pollution and stuff like that, it's sort of changed. These would be anomalies, but some of these insects they change if they have a 1-year life cycle. Sometimes they'll do like more than one, but it's a weird adaptation that's a product of pollution, actually.
Really? That's not just on The Simpsons, that's real life, huh?
So yeah, that's mayflies. I think, now that we know what the Latin name means, I think we can probably move on.
Mayflies in a nutshell, right? They are the classic hatch. They are the most celebrated insect, I would argue. More fly patterns and things designed around mayflies than any other flies, I believe.
That's true. And just to recap, the stages of them are nymph, emerger, dun, spinner. And nymph and emerger is basically the same thing, right?
Right.
I think the only sort of difference between those two is like, you have like a clinger nymph or something like that that's like stuck to a rock. And then when it decides it's going to become an adult, it lets go and it starts floating up, right? So I guess that's
true.
Kind of when it becomes an emerger. But basically, you would just fish them the same way, which is why we say that, right?
That's true. And one thing we should mention, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts too, but we should mention behavioral drift, which is when instinctually every one of these insects we're going to talk about, mayflies, caddisstones, you name it, are outside of terrestrials. All the aquatic insects are at some point instinctually, they just like they're connected to the bottom. They're living under a rock or living in a little weed bed. And every once in a while, they just kind of go, today's the day. Whoop, and they let go. And they just drift. And they sometimes drift for 10 minutes and sometimes for 10 miles. You never really know. But they do it instinctually to kind of repopulate the river. So they're not all, if you had a big population of them in one area, some of them will move and they repopulate downstream. And then the nymphs instinctually drift downstream. The adults instinctually fly upstream to lay eggs. So it's kind of a circle of life sort of a thing.
That's cool.
So even if they're not hatching, if they're just in the river, at some point during the day, every day, there are some bugs just drifting downstream, whether that's behavioral drift. There's also catastrophic drift, which is when flows increase dramatically, say below a dam, or from rain or snowmelt, or catastrophic drift could be when a crazy angler goes wading across and dislodges some things in the weeds and sticks and things in the river. Or
what about a seine angler?
Yeah, a seine. I don't know about the seine anglers. I've never met any of them, but I mean, there is such thing as catastrophic drift too, where they just get dislodged by even an animal, a deer walking across the river, or a muskrat kind of propelling itself along the bottom, a beaver swimming along, changing the current or making contact with the bottom could all dislodge insects.
Cool. That's a good thing. I'm glad that we mentioned that because we didn't have it really in our notes either. The last thing I'll say about mayflies, and I want your opinion on this, is that I've heard that the males have bigger eyes and they're oftentimes red.
I don't know that for sure. That sounds like something I would have read at some point. The red part, not so much, but larger eyes could be true. I don't know that that's true, but the adults definitely get pretty big eyes. I don't know that that's a trait from males to females. Somebody that is an entomologist could answer that for us for sure. But they do get, I think, large eyes compared to the rest of their body sometimes.
Okay. Let's just ask AI.
I like it because it's never wrong.
Do male mayflies have bigger eyes?
Yes, dramatically so. Male mayflies have large, turbinate eyes, sometimes called turban eyes,
Racist.
Not that kind of turban.
that sit on top of their head and face upward.
That's great. And,
Well.
and the AI knows us so well. It says,
It's one of those details that's fun to pop on the podcast because it's genuinely weird looking and people remember it.
that's pretty
Do you
funny.
think they use that as a pickup line? My, what big eyes you
Yeah,
have.
maybe.
Kind of like the big bad wolf.
There you go. All right. Caddisflies. Trichoptera. Is that how you would say that?
Trichoptera.
Trichoptera. There you go. That sounds like something out of G.I. Joe. So, yeah, caddisflies, also super famous. You've heard us talk about them on the show before. Why don't you go through a little bit of their life cycle and what if they have any distinctive sort of features?
So caddisflies, that's a big, just like mayflies, there are lots and lots of species, but caddisflies do have complete metamorphosis. They have egg, they have larva, they have pupa, and they have adults. So we don't generally imitate the egg form of any of these,
Right.
thankfully, because they're way too small, but they do have an egg. We are imitating the larval form, sometimes the pupa when they go to hatch, and certainly the adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they look grub-like, caddisflies do in the larva stage and even in the pupa stage, but the larva stage, they'll be grub-like with shorter legs. Once they pupate, then they start getting little wing buds and longer legs. Some of them will grow some large, long antenna as well.
Mm-hmm.
The adults are kind of like, I'm drawing a blank here. What do they call their wing style is like, they look like moths, but they have...
It's like a tent, right?
It is like a tent, but that's not what I'm struggling to come up with. They come up with, or they describe them as, it's not like a smooth wing. It's like a textured kind of wing, like it has tiny hairs. I can't remember the term, but they have a wing that basically has tiny little hairs on it, so that it doesn't really matter from the fishing standpoint, but it is something that caddis have. So the caddisfly wings are often mottled in color, not always, but quite frequently, multiple colors, almost gray to tans, browns mixed in there. The body colors can vary greatly from gingery orange through cream to tan, olive, bright green. What else have we seen
crazy, bright
caddisflies
green, huh?
in? Black. Yeah, I've seen some that are pretty bright. The larvae are very bright.
That I knew, yeah.
But
But
the
I didn't realize
adult,
the adults were too. That's crazy.
well, not very many of them are, but there are some that are pretty bright. Again, I haven't seen any that are as bright chartreuse as some of the larvae are for sure.
Yeah.
But there are some that are pretty green colored. Yeah, gray, black. There's all kinds of different colors of bodies of caddis and wings for that matter. They also come in a wide range of sizes from, I've seen caddis that I would say are 22s and maybe up to about size 8s.
Wow.
Seems like most of the caddis that we see around are more in the 14, 16. If I had to pick two sizes, 14, 16 size caddis are most common where I fish at least.
Yeah, I found that's exactly
we do
what
see
I keep
some,
in my box pretty much.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I have some
I always have a
18s
few
too.
12s, of course. Always have a few 12s, always have a few 18s. I haven't found an instance where the microcaddis, there have been some microcaddis on one of my local tailwaters lately that I would say are 20s, for sure 20s, maybe even 22s.
Wow.
But they're not very numerous, and I haven't really seen the fish get on them much. I've just been fishing bionic ants, and they've been crushing those. So they're clearly not too selective on the caddis.
What about their
they-
their nymphal stage? I know that they come in kind of different variations, right? And there's some flies that imitate that a little bit, like your GTI caddis, sorry, Gleam in the Cube.
Oh, good.
What was the
Yeah,
reference
they
to the
do.
GTI?
So GTI's go-to imitation.
That's cool.
So yeah, you hit it the nail on the head there. The larval stage of them can be in several varieties. So some are case builders, some are more net builders. Some of them build cases out of rock, some will build cases out of wood, and by rock I mean like almost sand particles and micro pieces. They're not obviously moving boulders, right? They're taking tiny, tiny pieces of sediment and creating a little case that surrounds them for protection. But they can also do that out of wood and leaf and detritus. What else? You can have free living caddis that don't build any sort of case, that just wander around on the rocks. Most of the caddis we talk about are in rivers, but there are some also in lakes. They're not nearly as common in lakes, but they are in lakes. Outside of that, what else? What can we?
As far as the different types of cases that they make or cases that they don't make, does that change how you, like, what flies you choose, which nymphs you choose? If you know there's case caddis, like a thread Frenchie could be taken as a case caddis, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they sure could. I mean, it certainly could. I don't know enough about caddis to know without a doubt that some of them always make cases out of particular items. I would guess that most of them have favorite. Most of the species have a favorite material, but if that material is not in the river in abundance, then they probably make exceptions to their rule and use what they have access to, I would imagine, right? But
I didn't know
every
if
river
you
is
were tying nymphs that looked like free living caddis or nymphs that looked like case caddis, or if you're just if there was anything like that involved.
I do that, yeah, for sure. But like you said, I don't get real specific on cased caddis because I feel like a Frenchie most of the time covers that base pretty well for me. But you could do, instead of kind of the brown pheasant tail type body like on a Frenchie, you could do something that's more hare's ear if it was more of a a darker squirrel or something for the case, or the case for something that's using a more wood derived case. But I don't usually get that specific with them, but you sure could.
Okay. Do the free living ones, are they that chartreuse green?
They vary a lot in color. Most of the ones I see around here often are green, but we also get some that are gray and some that are kind of tannish olive, I guess I would call them. I don't know the species that they are, but they get quite large. Some of our fisheries around here will have some that are 8s, 10s, certainly 12s. They're pretty big.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I was asking about the green one because in PA they fish that green weenie, which is supposed to be like a little inchworm that falls off the leaves. But I was always like, this thing kind of looks like a caddis to me.
Yeah, it's caddis green. I bet they could take it for either one,
That's what
right?
my
I'm with
thought
you. The
was,
green weenies are definitely more inchworm imitations by design, but we're giving the fish a lot of credit if we think that they're looking at it and going, that's an inchworm or that's a caddis, right? Just looks green, looks like food, acts like food, must be food. Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. They could take it as a caddis or I don't think they take it as either one. They don't know what they are. They just know it's food.
Right. Fair. Okay, interesting. That's cool. Now, let's talk a little bit about caddis and a caddis hatch, or how they behave, because I know that they behave much differently as adults than mayflies do.
They do, yeah. Caddis are generally, there are different types of mayflies. There are, burrowers, clingers, swimmers, and so on. So some mayflies are pretty good swimmers, but caddis flies, the pupal versions of them are known to be quite good swimmers. So they can move from the the bottom to the surface pretty well. They're not jet propulsions, but they swim pretty well. So sometimes when there's a caddis hatch going, I find swinging soft tackles one can be very good, a good technique, I should say. It's a pretty forgiving time on the river too, because I think that's a time where there's so many bugs moving, at a little more rapid pace from the bottom to the surface, that when we're not getting a drag-free drift like we often strive to get, and our fly is swimming or twitching or lifting slightly, Lysin ring lift sort of action, whether that's caused by us doing it purposely or by a bad cast that's creating a little bit of lift because it's creating some drag. Sometimes a caddis hatch is one of the favorite hatches of beginning anglers because the fish are so user-friendly at that time. And I think that just is because of the insects themselves being so mobile. You're also kind of alluding to the fact that once they hatch, they bounce around a lot. They land on the water. When they come back to lay eggs, they're bouncing on the water surface, and the caddis are ovipositing and laying their eggs.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that the caddis do that is movement based. That the fish are used to a caddisfly skating, and in some cases swimming like skating, I should call it, across the surface, but they'll do it on lakes even, where they are just leaving a wake behind them the whole way they go. They're pretty suicidal.
That's crazy.
Like just putting a target on their back. Here I am. Yeah.
That's wild.
It's a fun hatch, right? I mean, you fish caddis hatches where it's still sometimes very important to get a drag-free drift, but it's also sometimes just as effective or more effective to have a skating caddis. We've talked about it before on our podcast, and we've done YouTube videos and things on it here and there, but there's techniques where you can skate a caddis by using a nymph dropper and a dry fly on a tag off a main line, and use the weight of the fly the weight of the nymph to anchor the rig in the current, and then kind of shake your rod tip and get that caddis to bounce and twitch and skate across the surface. And sometimes that really induces strikes. It's a fun way to fish.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's fun. One thing which is sort of tangential, that it's not about any particular insect, but I do want to ask because it is kind of coming up here. You'll go to a river and you'll realize very quickly that you have to fish with the best version of a drag-free drift that you can. And then you'll go to another river and you'll be doing that and you won't catch anything, and then you start activating the fly and moving them a little bit and you'll instantly start catching fish. Do you know if there's any rhyme or reason to that, or is it just you just got to feel it out?
I don't know any for sure rhyme or reason. The first thing that comes to mind when you say that are different species of fish. Sometimes like brookies, for me, love motion. They love skating flies, especially small brookies in little streams. I've even had brookies where on lakes where they're eating stuff off the surface or near the surface. I've had a few experiences where I'm fishing like a Chernobyl ant, let's say, or a big foam fly with a dropper, mostly trying to catch them on the dropper, but occasionally get one to come up and eat the dry. And sometimes you make a cast and then another fish rises, 30 feet to the right or to the left or whatever direction it is. And so you hurry and strip in your rig to try and reposition to where you just saw the most recent fish surface. And while doing that, while you're waking this giant Chernobyl ant across the surface, the brookie comes up and just attacks the dry fly when they were leaving it completely alone while it was sitting there. Yeah. But as soon as you start skating it, they go nuts. I think some of that boils down to pressure. Certainly for me, the places where fish get more pressure, they're less likely to attack a moving fly, with the exception being when there's like a caddis hatch or something going on. But outside of that, heavily pressured areas, they're not usually dumbed down enough for that to happen. But streams that don't have much pressure, yeah, sometimes they like a little drag could be your friend, right?
Yeah.
A little skating action.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that's what because I've noticed in the driftless that, a little bit of movement, and it is quite pressured there. Does actually make a big difference.
And is it just a twitch, or is it like you're constantly moving it?
No, it's like a twitch here and there.
Just to let it go. I mean, people do that with hoppers and things too, where they just give it a little twitch, a beetle once in a while.
Yeah. Just
to let the fish know it's there and make sure they know it's alive.
I've noticed my catch rate go up with nymphs and dries just by, just doing a little bit of movement every so often.
Animating it. Yeah, I'm with you. It's a good technique, I think, to try. My fallback, of course, is dead drift, but when that's not working and there are fish to be had, why not try it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've had plenty of experiences with more, I mentioned the brookies, but more than just brookies, with brown trout, with grayling and other species where kind of by accident, you're making casts that you think are really great, and then you go to strip it in to make the next cast, and while your dry fly is waking across the surface, the fish nab it. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely times and places where that's what they want. Why, we don't always know, but that's what keeps us coming back.
Interesting. All right. I like that.
The Scientific Anglers segment.
Jumping in hot. Today we're discussing something of interest to probably 2% of you. But those 2% are going to be very excited.
It's way more than 2%. Are you kidding?
We're talking about connectivity, control, and castability because each one of those things comes with its pros and cons, and they sort of cancel each other out in certain ways. You can be very connected to something, but maybe it will mess with its castability. Or you can have a lot of control and it messes with its sensitivity. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today on the essay segment. Isn't that right, Lance?
Yeah.
I was trying to think of one way we could wrap our heads around this concept, and we were talking about Euro lines and braid core versus monocore.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of a good archetypal example of how there's trade-offs between those two core materials, right?
Certainly.
So is one more sensitive than the other?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could argue that the monocore is more sensitive. It's solid, not hollow. So I think it transmits better. I know I feel like I have better sensitivity when I fish a monocore, but that comes at a cost, right? The monocore also has more memory. So in really cold water, the monocore doesn't handle as well. The monocore limits the ways that you can connect your leaders to the line, where the braided core may be slightly less sensitive, but much less memory. So it lays straighter. When it's really cold outside, the braided core, because it doesn't have as much memory, it's casts better, handles better, et cetera, et cetera. On the flip side of things, when it's really hot out, the stiffness of the monocore can actually help the thin line push through the guides because it's a little stiffer core. So it's all about trade-off. So in a perfect world, customers ask me this in the shop all the time when I'm rigging a new SA Euro line for them, and I ask them, do you want a braided core or a monocore? And they say, what do you suggest? And I say, I suggest both. You need one of each. If you really want to get nerdy about it, there are advantages to both. That's why they make both of them. If you're just going to get one, I usually steer people toward the braided core because I think it works in more environments and is more user-friendly most of the time, in addition to having more opportunities or options, I should say, to connect leaders to it. But when it's really hot out and you want a little stiffer line or you're really working with sensitivity, jigging streamers or something like that, where you're really concerned with the sensitive aspect of a Euro setup, then the monocore could be the better option.
Okay. That's cool. That's very cool. So do you feel like, let's just put a, hypothetical scenario.
Sure.
We put a bunch of fish in a pool and you're going to Euro nymph them. So it's a controlled environment is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Not outside. Just a regular controlled room temperature environment. Do you think one would be more sensitive than the other?
One fly line? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think that the monocore would be more sensitive so long as you've taken the time to stretch it and get the memory out of it.
Interesting.
But there are also other things affecting your sensitivity, like your rod, your handle choice, your leader diameter, your leader material. There are lots of other factors that play in that can have an effect. That's why, to me, I base it more on what I'm going to do, time of year, thickness of leader, those sorts of things.
You said handle choice. Are you talking about like cork versus something else?
Yeah, like cork versus carbon fiber. So cork is very deadening, and carbon fiber handles as tactile, allows you to feel strikes better.
Interesting. Okay, we'll have to talk about that in the regular podcast, but that's a subject I want to dive into at some point.
Cool.
Regardless, if you're looking for a line for the Euro jams, check out the SA Euro Mastery lines because they get the job done and you have both options, mono or braid.
They have both of them there.
Actually, you know what my favorite genre of music is?
House.
Monocore. Not hardcore, monocore.
I would have had you pegged as more of indie.
Why ever would you say that? My hat? The last thing we should say about caddisflies is that they pupate like a butterfly, which is also cool to know. If you like butterflies, you should like caddisflies. Because they
maybe
both poopate.
The caddis hatch it's a fun one it's a fun hatch to fish. The fish can go nuts. There's lots of stages to imitate. Like I mentioned earlier, the fish can be a little more user friendly, I think, in a caddis hatch. And if we're being honest, I think caddis are actually. What caddis hatches can you name off top of your head? You fish for a while. Like if I said name some mayfly hatches, what would you say?
Hexagenia, those white
Okay.
flies that they get in
Coffin flies.
in Pennsylvania.
What else? What
Trying
other
to think.
mayfly hatches have you fished or heard of?
Hendrickson's.
Okay. I mean, you're even hitting, in my opinion, some of the outliers. What are some of the mainstays, mayfly wise?
Just name mayflies. You can tell me if they green drakes.
Blueing
and
olives.
Oh, right.
Yeah, green drakes.
That was
That's what I mean. PMDs. I think you're making it harder than I'm thinking. Yeah, exactly. Gray drakes, green drakes, brown drakes. You could go down the list. Tricos. You can go down the list and name off a whole bunch of mayfly hatches. Okay, now let's do the same thing for caddis flies. What caddis hatches?
I mean, if I had to guess, I'd just be like tan.
Tan, yeah, olive, black caddis.
Yeah, black caddis.
I'm with you. That's my point. Is it's like we have Mother's Day caddis. We
I
have
forgot that one.
American granum. We have granum caddis hatches. There's a handful of caddis hatches, October caddis, but there aren't very many. There are a whole bunch of species of caddis that, for some reason, we don't celebrate as fly fishers as much as we do mayflies. We have whole bins in the shop, like whole acrylic cases with several drawers of patterns for green drakes and flavs, and lines of bins for calibatus, and entire bins for PMDs, and entire bins for bluing olives. And then we have like a caddis box. And we have, what's hatching caddis? Nobody says, oh, it's the, I'm just going to make nonsense up, but it's the red focus caddis,
Right.
or the hocus pocus caddis.
Yeah.
We don't even have like common fly fishing names for them, let alone, I know some serious entomologists would be able to tell us, oh, those are glossosomas, or those are hydropsyche, those are whatever. But it's funny to me that we, and I'm as guilty as anybody, we just don't celebrate the caddis as much. We just say, oh yeah, the caddis are out. Cool. What color were they and what size?
It's kind of true.
We don't do that with mayflies. Well, the mayflies are hatching. Oh, what were they? They were yellow and like 16. Everybody go, oh, that's a PMD or that's a sulfur.
Right. That's hilarious.
What caddis? That's a tan one, about 14. Perfect. I got it dialed.
It's kind of all you need.
It is all you need, but it's just interesting that we don't celebrate them as much.
It's true.
It's a tangent, but it's a funny one.
caddis, they just don't get any love, man.
No,
Underrated.
no, second rate insects there.
Yep. Well, they look like moths, and people typically don't like moths, so I will say that.
This is true.
So that's probably part of it. Mayflies don't look like anything else. Like, it's like that thing just looks weird. You know what I mean?
Mayflies do look more, what's the right word? They look, I don't want to say that, the first word that came to mind is pretentious, but they don't look pretentious. They just tend to make us pretentious.
They have like an elegance to them.
Yeah, elegant. That's a perfect term. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They look very elegant, and caddisflies look pretty drab.
That's true. You know when mayflies don't look elegant, though? When there's 5,000 of them swarming your cabin in the middle of the summer.
And they're huge, and they're creating big messes. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, in Michigan,
Fair enough.
They call them fish flies, and that's the hex hatch that happens up there. And I remember when I was going to school up there, I wasn't fishing back then, and we were so grossed out by these things because they're just like thousands and thousands that would just black out your windows, black out your doors. Now I'm like, geez, I can't believe I missed that opportunity because there's a bunch of trout streams right by where I was. But
yeah, you could have fished them all night and catch some giants.
Mm-hmm. Anywho, all right, let's keep moving. Next one up, Plecoptera.
You got it, Plecoptera.
Stoneflies. So these are kind of dangerous because up until recently they weren't legalized, but now they are.
What are you talking about?
They're stoned, bro.
Oh, I got you. Now they're okay.
Now they're
suddenly being high is great for you. Before it was taboo.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's just all of a sudden it's good for you.
Yeah, now it's okay. Now everyone's allowed to do that.
Sure. So stoneflies, stoneflies are cool because they are also incomplete metamorphosis, so they don't have a pupa stage. They just have the egg, the nymph, and the adult.
And that's analogous
to
the mayfly, right?
That is analogous to the mayfly. That's correct. Versus caddisflies are complete, and they just don't get the love. Maybe that's their problem. They just got to be more incomplete. So we feel bad for them.
It's true.
Stoneflies they're known as bigger insects, but they're not always big. You can have pretty small stones. The first stones to hatch each year are usually little early winter or tiny black stones, sometimes they're called, usually 16, 18, 20 size stoneflies that are black to chocolatey brown in color. I don't know. You could tell me if you've seen where you live. Where I live, we usually see them in February and March. Early March, that is, late, mid-February, early March. Not really a big deal most places. There's a few small streams around that has a pretty good population of them, but they're around. Other small stoneflies that come to mind would be yellow sallies, can be more, 14, 16, 18.
Okay.
I remember the rest of the stones get quite a bit bigger.
I don't think we really get them in the driftless at all because it's like they're spring creeks. But where Mario, my brother, has his place, for a long time he kept on being like, "What is this?" And I'm like, I had the hardest time knowing what it was. And I'm like, "It looks like a stonefly." And then he's like, "This thing's a stonefly." I'm like, "No, it's not a stonefly." He's like, "I'm pretty sure it's a stonefly." I'm like, "Nah, it's not. They're too small."
It's a big midge.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, in fact they were stoneflies, and they're small.
Yeah,
so it's like you always see, in all the videos and stuff, these like massive stoneflies, but they're not actually all that big, right?
Not all of them, no.
Yeah.
No, the more celebrated hatches of stoneflies are larger. The squallas, the goldens, the salmon flies. Yeah, those get bigger, but yeah, I mean, stoneflies, I think one of the things that's cool about stoneflies that I mentioned the opposite of earlier, which is, mayflies and caddis generally are on 1 year life cycles. Stoneflies are usually on 2, 3, sometimes even 4 year life cycles. I don't know this to be true, but my impression of part of the reason for that is that if I were guessing that some of the stoneflies that have shorter life cycles are probably the smaller stones. And obviously to get to
That makes sense.
the large sizes of Pteronarcis and golden stones, they got to have a growing time, right? They got to grow for quite a while.
Yeah.
So they're going to have several instars to go from egg to like a size 2 hook, or a size 6 hook. So
Define
they got to
instar, because
be.
you keep using that word.
Sorry, instars, that's a good call out. Instar is, so every time that an insect grows in their nymphal form and they grow larger, they basically kind of shed their exoskeleton to a new, bigger size, and they call that an instar. So they would, it's kind of like growing, but instead of just as humans grow consistently in their skin, the insects often shed their skin, grow into a new, larger skin, if that makes sense.
It's like when a snake molts.
Yeah, it would be much like that.
Cool. Just
It
wanted to
would.
make sure that we covered that one.
That's a good call out. I like it. So yeah, the instars there. That one cool thing about stones that's often misunderstood by anglers. I recommend stonefly nymphs kind of year round for some of our waterways locally, and people will often question me. I mean, I've even had people ask me, like, look me straight in the eye and say, "Have you ever fished, such and such river?" After they just asked me for help on it. "Hey, I'm going to River X, and what do you recommend?" And I say, "Oh, on River X, you want to do these stoneflies and this sow bug and this blah blah blah," and they'll just go, "Stoneflies? It's March. Like, why would you fish stoneflies? Have you ever even fished River X?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I've fished there like 5,000 times probably." And they'll be like, "Well, you don't fish stoneflies this time of year." And I'm like, "Well, I do. I mean, you don't have to, but you just asked me what I would suggest." And that's one of the things I catch fish on. People are convinced that you don't fish stoneflies except when they're hatching, which is totally a mistake. Those big stones are in the river for 2, 3, 4 years, and there's various sizes and year classes of them. So even if they're not hatching, they're always in the river bottom. That doesn't mean that they're always available for the fish to get, but like we talked about a second ago, they do have behavioral drift. So at some point during every day, there are some stoneflies. If there are stoneflies in the river you're fishing, at some point during the day, there's some stoneflies, or the night, stoneflies that are drifting down the river just to instinctually repopulate, right? So they're always in there. I find them to be very effective quite a bit of the year, actually, even in some places right through the dead of winter.
Wow, that's cool. One thing I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't really fish the emergence of stoneflies because they hatch on the bank, right?
You only do when you're messing with people. We sometimes mess with people in the shop and talk about stonefly emergers, but yeah.
Okay, fair.
No, we don't really do that. I'm just teasing. But You definitely do not fish stonefly emergers because they crawl out. So they don't swim to the surface like caddis or mayflies or midges do. It's good call out. They are a crawl to the bank to hatch. So one thing that gets very effective when stoneflies are about to hatch is fishing stonefly nymph imitations tight to banks, the first 3 or 4 feet tight to a bank because they're migrating to the shoreline. So that's kind of where they're all located, where they might have lived the last 3 years out in the middle of a riffle underneath some cobblestone. Now they're migrating towards the banks, and so there's lots of food there.
What would indicate
so
to you
no
that
need
they're
for an
about to
emerger.
hatch?
That's right. They crawl out on bankside vegetation and rocks and bridges and trees and anything they can crawl out on and break free of their exoskeleton and emerge into the winged adult. They pump fluid into the wings, dry the wings out, and then they start flying around. And I think most stoneflies the adults can live, I think a lot of them a week to even maybe 2 weeks or so.
Wow.
They're known to have more, like them. I didn't talk about this, but I know mayflies don't. I don't think caddisflies either. I don't think either of those species, once they hatch into adults, do any feeding. Like they don't have mouth parts that allow them to feed anymore. Where I think stoneflies are capable of. I don't think they do a lot of feeding, but I think they do have the mouth parts that make them capable to feed a little bit.
He ain't got no mouth parts.
Ain't got them mouth parts. They can live a little longer. So that's kind of cool.
The mouth parts?
I don't know about their mouth parts, but the stoneflies are pretty cool. They are pretty clumsy flyers, where mayflies and caddis are, I think, a little more calculated. The stones seem to be, if you've ever fished a big stonefly hatch with larger stones, you can feel them when they land on your hat because they kind of hit you with a thud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're pretty clumsy. They end up in the water. They also will skate and skitter across the surface while they're laying eggs.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they are. That's a fun bug because they get to large sizes. The probably most famous stonefly hatch is the salmonfly hatch, as people call it. Sometimes in our neighboring state, I've never heard this in Utah, but in Idaho, I've heard people refer to the salmonfly hatch as the troutfly hatch.
That's a cool hatch to be there for.
Just an interesting one too. Yeah. What happens when you catch whitefish during the troutfly hatch?
Oh, you failed. Mission
Are you doing
incomplete.
you might be doing something illegal. I don't know. Yeah, but the stoneflies, man, that's a cool bug. That's a hard hatch to hit because it's usually short-lived. Sometimes the salmonflies in particular hatch in such huge numbers, they seem to get really stuffed. They just get gorged, and I think they can't eat anymore, it seems like.
Wow.
Because you can be there. I've been on rivers where there's crazy salmonfly hatches going on, and you arrive and there's salmonflies crawling out the banks, and they're climbing up the sides of the drift boat or up your waders, and they're all over the bankside vegetation, and the stoke is high. You're just like, this is going to be an epic day.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 3 hours later, you're still trying to catch like fish number 2 or 3.
Dang.
And there's stoneflies everywhere, but the fish have just had too much of them already, it seems.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. So, and the indicator that they're about to emerge is that you start seeing them on the rocks and on the bank and on the trees and whatnot, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to watch for the emergence to start to happen, you'd be checking rocks on the banks to see when they start congregating near the banks. Once they start climbing out, and they're out of the water, they're only going to do that to hatch. So
Right.
they're already hatching at that point. If you're seeing them on bankside vegetation and crawling out of the water, then it's hatch time.
Okay. Cool.
We didn't talk much about stonefly looks. We should do that real quick, probably.
Perfect. That's good because
Stonefly.
She's got the look. That's hot. President's
She's got the
tuxedo.
look.
It was a President's Tuxedo commercial from like 1994.
I was going at 80s. She's got the look song, but okay.
The look.
So the looks of stoneflies, the features, they're usually more elongated. They have a downwing. It's more over the back than less tent style, where caddis would be tent style, mayflies would be more upright, more sailboat looking. The stonefly wing lays straight over their abdomen. They often have a forked tail, so two tails that are more stout looking than mayflies. Caddis don't have tails as adults. Stoneflies, yeah, they can be pretty big. Most people that are chasing stones, with the exception of the tiny winter and the sallies, most other stones are like size 12, size 10, up through 6'4",
Crazy.
really big salmon flies could be giant. So they're quite large. They look a little intimidating if you sample a river and you find stoneflies. People that haven't held them and seen them before are a little bit leery to hold them in their hand. They're often actually mistaken for Helgramites, which are Dobson fly larvae.
Yeah.
And Helgramites can and will bite you, so you don't want to
Really?
make
I
that
didn't know
mistake.
that.
Yeah, stoneflies not so much, but they'll just crawl around on you. They don't bite. But the Helgramites, yeah, they're not real friendly.
Didn't know that.
So stones, they don't. They look pretty prehistoric,
Yeah.
really. 2 antennae, 2 tails. The nymphs don't have any wing, obviously, just legs, body, more elongated body, abdomen, and shorter thorax, generally speaking. Kind of short legs for the rest of the size of their body.
Sometimes you see
else?
the salmon flies that have like that sort of salmon colored band, almost collar around them.
Yeah, they'll have kind of an orangey colored band. The adults especially have that band sometimes behind one of their segments near their head.
Mm-hmm.
And the salmon flies can vary quite a bit from almost charcoal color to cinnamon brown to having quite a bit of orange to them.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I mean, the most common stones are the salmon flies. So if you're not sure what they look like, just get on the old Google machine and type in Pteronarcis, PT, like pterodactyl, if that makes sense, Pteronarcis, or just type in salmon fly for fly fishing, salmon fly, stonefly maybe, so you don't get Pacific or Atlantic salmon flies. But then look up golden stonefly and maybe look up squala and maybe look up yellow Sally and then tiny winter stone, and you'll get pictures of all those so you can envision what they are, because I'm going to be terrible at describing what they look like.
What about describing the nymph, though?
I did a little bit of that. Nymph has 2 tails, longer abdomen.
Oh, that's what you
shorter
were talking
thorax,
about, the nymphs. Okay. Nice.
stubby. I mean, they don't really look that much different, nymph to adult, except that the adult has wings, right? The coloration varies a little bit, but like golden stonefly adults tend to be golden to yellow colors, kind of the same. Slightly lighter belly than darker back. The legs look basically the same, adult to nymph. You just kind of add a wing to the adult, and you're basically, they look just like the nymphs.
Yeah, they kind of look like almost like an earwig or something.
Yeah, like a really big earwig, maybe. I could follow that. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, no, they do. They have lots of segmentation to them and things, but
Especially
they are a little eerie looking.
Yeah.
But they're really cool once you get to kind of hold them and figure out what they are. Always fun when I'm kicking rocks with friends that are newer at fishing and show them some big stoneflies. They're always like, wow, that's kind of big and intimidating, I don't want to hold that thing.
Yeah, we see a lot of the shucks. Is that what you would call the shuck?
Yeah.
We see a lot of the shucks on the bank at my brother's river where he fishes. You see them on the rocks a lot.
Yeah, where they've crawled out and left their exoskeleton when they transitioned into an adult.
Yep.
They'll leave those all over the place. Rocks, bridge abutments, bankside vegetation, etc.
Pretty neat. It's pretty neat, y'all.
Pretty cool. Really neat. It's a cool bug. Most stones, we didn't really talk about when they hatch, but they mostly hatch, let's say, most of the bigger stones are in the March, April through July timeframe. And the little guys, as we did mention, early season, kind of February, March.
Okay. Good to know.
I think we've covered stoneflies. Obviously, we're giving you real high-level stuff. You could really go into nerd-out depths if you want to, but we're just kind of giving you some things to think about when you're building a fly box or building some flies to imitate them, and give you a little background on why you would want to have them and what times of year to expect them.
Exactly. Well, let's keep moving on the next one. We've got a couple more here. The next one is midges, chironomids, the year-round constant. So
they are always there.
Midges. Maybe you fished a Griffith's gnat at some point. That's supposed to be a little clump of midges. They're kind of around year-round, right? Is that right?
Yeah, they can hatch year-round. They're, especially in colder water environments, tailwaters and things, you can see them year-round. They're definitely more important in the colder months, colder water times. I think sometimes even if they hatch in the summer, they just get overshadowed by hatches of larger insects. I guess if you had the choice of, eating something that's size 14 or 16 or something that's size 24, you're going to opt for the bigger meals. But yeah, they can be year round for sure. They're I think most important in rivers during the cold months. So in my local waters, really December, January, February, early March. And then by the time you get to April, they're still important, but in rivers, less important because other things start to come into play. Cold months, that's the key with midges for sure. But they are around. They're always there. There's always larvae in the system there. I think that most midges are at most 1 year life cycle. I think some of them actually have several broods in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always some midge larva or pupa. In most of the tailwater fisheries in the West, you can catch fish on midge larva and pupa for that matter, but mostly larva imitations every single day of the year.
Cool. Yeah, I think also what's cool about them, if you're doing winter fishing, be on the lookout for midges. And what's cool is if there's snow, you can see them pretty easily because they like stick out against the white background, which is nice.
They can. Yeah, they tend to be dark in color, right? The most common midge color is black. They do come in different colors. I've seen adults in lots of different colors, gray. I've even seen some that are like lime green before.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it is a crazy one. I had some guys that came into a shop I was working in like 25-ish years ago, and they told me they were encountering this kind of lime green, not chartreuse, but like really lime green midge hatch. Well, they didn't know what it was. They just said it was a hatch, but it was a time of year where I was like bordering on blueing olives, and I showed them. I'm like, did it look like this? Did it have little sailboat wings and look kind of olive? They're like, no. This was like bright green. And okay. I'd never seen anything or heard anything of the sort. And I kind of called them on. I'm like, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Like they're really bright green. And they're like, yeah, I swear I've never seen anything like it, but they were bright green. They were everywhere and the fish were going nuts. I need you to tie me some flies for this. And I ended up tying in some flies, and they went then like 2 or 3 days later, and they came back and they were like, we just murdered them.
Wow.
And I'm like, really, on that lime green fly I just tied you? They're like, yeah, it was perfect. Like size 18s and 20s, lime green, like the top of your Shimazaki dry shake. Your lid,
Yeah.
they're that green.
Crazy.
So I was still in disbelief. I just couldn't believe what they were telling me. Well, I've never seen anything like that. I've seen cream midges before. I've seen certainly gray and maybe even some that are, I would call it charcoal or brownish in color. Most of them are black. I've never seen any that are lime green. I'm like, so is it just the body that's lime green? They're like, no, the whole thing's lime green, like the legs, the body, the wing, everything.
Weird.
Like, I don't know.
It's like a praying
They're like, we
mantis
need more.
color.
So I tied more of them. They picked them up. They came to pick them up at the shop on like a Friday afternoon. And they're like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Why don't you just go with us? And I'm like, I work Saturdays. And they're like, we'll take care of that. So they went to the owner of the shop, and they're like, hey, we're borrowing Lance tomorrow. And he's like, you're what? Well, he's working here. And they're like, no. We buy lots of stuff from here, which they did. Both those guys were good customers. They're like, we're borrowing Lance for the day. And he's like, I guess. Okay. So I was young and single, and I didn't have nothing to hold me back. So I was like, okay. We drove. It was in a neighboring state. We drove up that night actually. And I had time after work to run home, grab stuff, meet them. And then we head out. And the next morning we wake up and head to the river. And sure enough, there were some bright green midges. I've never seen them before, and I've never seen them since. But for that week or two period, they were around.
That is wild.
It is wild. I bet if you go back, I don't spend a lot of time on that waterway, so I bet if I went back at the same time, they got to hatch. It's got to be, can't just be a one-time thing. It's got to be there.
What time of year was it?
Spring. I would say it was March. Might have been late February, but early March, I think, is probably when it was.
That's wild.
We weren't seeing blue wings. There were not very many black midges, a few, but not very many, but lots of these bright green ones. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at a
Midges.
picture of them right now, actually.
Are
They
you?
have them online, yeah.
Bright green midge.
Yeah.
There's everything online.
It's kind of wild, huh? That's crazy. And they are exactly how you're describing. I'm going to drop this in the chat for you.
They're pretty lime green. So chronomids and midges, basically same family. The midges are a complete life cycle. They have egg, they have larva, they have pupa, they have adults. We can imitate all those except for the egg again. Midges do not have tails. They just have an abdomen. They have relatively long legs for the size of their body. Their wings basically cover the entire abdomen, so they have long wings, but they lay back kind of, I would say, almost halfway between a caddis and a stonefly. They're not quite as flat-winged as a stonefly and not quite as tent-winged as a caddis. Somewhere in the middle of those two.
They kind of look like a mosquito. I always think of them as like mosquitoes.
They do. They look a lot like mosquitoes, except they don't have the mosquito.
stinger.
They're actually the same. They don't have. Yeah, they don't. They're the same family.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, mosquitoes are true flies like that. So they don't have they don't have anything to bite you with, but the midges for fishing. There are some biting bugs people call midges, right? Little black flies and things that do bite. But the midges we're talking about are non-biting.
That's how we like our midges.
That is how we like our midges, because they can be a real burden if they're biting. Because they hatch in big numbers. They are such prolific insects that they are really important to the trout, especially during those colder months when nothing else is really hatching. The fish can get really dialed into them, and being small is key. Most midges, big midges are 14s or 16s. Those are in rivers anyway. Those are big. In lakes, you could see some really big midges in 8s and 10s and 12s. But most midges in river systems are, I would say, 18 and smaller, and most of them are really 20, 22 and smaller. They are really, really small.
That sounds right.
They're tiny. Again, most generally, their larval stage is most commonly black, but they can be brown, they can be charcoal, they can be olive, they can be bright red, like a bloodworm. What else? They can have different colored segmentation to them. They can be a combination of black and red, for instance, or black and silver looking.
Is there like a certain part of their life cycle that trout tend to focus on more than another?
Probably the larva and pupa, they tend to focus on probably the most, but if you get enough of them on the surface, you can get a pretty good midge dry fly hatch too.
Yeah, I remember I was fishing the Sierras in February, I think it was. And I saw all these fish rising, and I'm like, what's going on? So I creeped on over real quietly. It took forever to get there. Got about 15 feet from these things, and I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, those are midges. And then I could see them in the snow and stuff. So I tied on a black sort of midge thing, made a few casts. It was probably like 20 feet, but whatever. I made a few casts. I couldn't get anything to eat, like not one thing to eat. This was pretty early in my career too. It was on the Owens, which is pretty pressured. And yeah, they weren't spooking. They kept rising all around my fly, but they would not eat.
And what do you think? What was the cause?
I think they were eating emergers. I think that they were not
emergers.
Yeah, that would be my guess now.
Very likely.
Yeah, I was bummed.
Midges are overlooked. I'll bet you were bummed. Yeah, when you're seeing some fish that are active and you're not getting them, that's never ideal.
Especially at that time.
Nobody
of year,
likes that.
It's just like
right. Midges, I can tell you, working in a shop, midges are not overlooked because skilled anglers know how important they are, but they are overlooked by beginning anglers, I would say. Some of the rookies just don't want to mess with them because they're so small. Which is often a mistake. I tell people in the shop all the time on some of our local tailwaters where the fish get piles of pressure and they get guided to every day of their life and that sort of thing. The difference, people ask what's the difference between the guides that I'm seeing on the river that are catching lots of fish and why can't I catch fish? And I'll say, well, what are you fishing? And they tell me they're using 14s, 16s, and 18s. And I'll say, okay, yeah, you're using 14, 16, 18s on 5X, and the guides that are in the same run as you or just upstream in the next run or downstream in the next run below you are using, 6 or 7X and 22s to 26s. And people are just like, I'm just not willing to go that small. And you're like, well, that's okay. You get to choose. It's just, if that's what they're eating, you might consider it.
Yeah.
It might be in your best interest, but people get real funny about that. There's a hard line where all the time, almost every day I'll have somebody say, I'm not buying that. It's just too small. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not one of those people, but I think that that makes sense for some people, especially if you have trouble tying knots and small eye holes and have trouble seeing and that sort of thing, then it sort of makes sense. But otherwise, if you don't have any of those problems, then you're just being a baby and get your act together.
There's definitely reasons not to fish flies that small, right? But hopefully you've got readers to take care of most of that stuff and you're pretty adept at tying knots and then you can adapt to whatever. That said, I'm with them. I always have a few 26s in my nymph box. I fish them incredibly rarely because I don't like fishing flies that small either, but I always have a few.
That's hilarious.
I fish a lot more 1820s, 22s, kind of maybe where I draw the line as in my normal nymphs, if that makes sense.
That's fair. That makes
My,
sense.
my normal assortment of flies. But you got to have a few of the mini minis.
Yeah.
When they want them, they want them.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different midge patterns too. I think the zebra midge is probably the most ubiquitous, but there's a bunch of different versions of that too. So if you've seen a zebra midge,
Totally.
I mean, probably if you're listening to this podcast, you probably
Seen a zebra
you've
midge.
seen a zebra midge a million times and didn't need me to tell you that. So
And if you haven't, then Google
yeah.
it. So midges, real quick, if we go through, the larvae are more worm-like, kind of skinny grubs, if you will, but worm-like, no legs, nothing on them. The pupa are worm-like, except they get a little bit more pronounced thorax, a little bit larger diameter thorax, and you can start to see wing buds forming.
Okay.
And then the adults will be winged, and they'll still have kind of that skinny worm-like body, but then they grow fairly long legs for the size of flies that they are, right? No tails. Some of them will get antenna. They look like ostrich feathers sticking out the front of them in micro scale, like the little feather duster sticking out the front of them. But they're, kind of a tiny little antenna, often white or gray in color. The adults most commonly are black, but as we discovered earlier, they could be lime green, they can be brown, they can be olive, they could be gray. People in the shop often refer to them as white. They're like, I saw these white bugs. I've never figured that one out because I've never seen any that are like pure white, but I think they just don't see them up close well enough they look like they're seeing the sparkle or the glint off
they
their
do
wings.
reflect white, but then when you get close, you're like, oh, it's like
Right.
clearly a black bug,
Agreed, because people come in quite a bit in the winter. I saw a whole bunch of little white bugs hatching. And you're like, no, you didn't.
They were lime
Look
green
closer.
and white.
They were lime green
not.
and tangerine, the sickly sweet colors of the devil in my dream. That was a song reference too.
All right. I think that was pretty good for the old midjo.
The old midges.
Yeah, you should fish them. They're good. So next one up is terrestrials, which we've talked about a lot. I talk about the bionic ant, Lance's pattern all the time because it's a straight killer, no filler. But walk us through the terrestrials here. I mean, everyone kind of knows a lot of this stuff already. We're just laying the base before we get into like some more black diamond-y things. But it would feel weird to not talk about these before we get to them. So
Agreed, yeah. So we've been talking all about aquatic insects so far. The mayflies, the stoneflies, the caddis, the midges all live in the water. And now terrestrials are just like they sound. They live on the terrestrial environment, on the land. So they don't hatch from the water, but they sometimes end up in the water. As Pablo put here in the notes, the summer wild card. And it doesn't even have to be summer. It could be spring, could be fall. They're most prevalent when it's warm out in the summer, of course. But I was actually out fishing today, and we had probably a few days ago, we were pushing 90 degrees, and today we are back into like 32, 34 degrees. So we had quite a swing of temperatures. We got snow again at like maybe down to 6,000 feet or so. I live at like 4,500 feet. I was going to the river today expecting the fish to be lethargic and cold and not very happy. I started out nymphing and wasn't doing particularly well. Actually, dry dropper nymphing, but just shallow, riffly pocket water. So I didn't need to get too deep. And I was getting nobody eating the nymphs that I was trying, but they kept coming up and eating my bionic ant that I was using as an indicator. So I, after about 4 or 5 fish, just took the nymph off and just started fishing it dry. And I fished it dry the rest of the time, and it was fantastic.
wow, that's fun.
I caught a lot of fish, even in cold conditions today. It was windy, but they really wanted the ant. There were a few crane flies around. There were a few blue-wing olives around. Didn't see any midges, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were some around. I didn't see any ants out and about, certainly not any on the water. I'm sure there were some if I looked on the bankside vegetation, but it rained a little bit where I was. And one thing I learned a long, long time ago is that after a rain, they really like ants.
Huh.
That was hit home again for me today.
That's a good
But yeah,
tip.
terrestrials can be ants, beetles, hoppers, cicadas, crickets, and on and on. They're just terrestrial insects that just end up in the river. They live on bankside vegetation. They live in the trees. They live on canyon walls. And by accident, they fall in based on wind or something else knocks them off and they end up in the river. And they can be really important, especially when there isn't a lot else that's hatching. So, my favorite things to fish there for sure are ants and hoppers, but when the timing's right for cicadas or crickets or other things, they can be really productive as well. We're not going to go into too much detail on the terrestrials because we think you've probably seen what an ant looks like and a grasshopper and a beetle and so on look like. Maybe a cicada is not so common. If you haven't seen them, maybe Google that one. But terrestrials, yeah, they live on the land. The fish still love them. They're really fun to fish because they tend to be larger than a lot of the other flies that we fish. And when they're around in decent numbers, they don't have to be in crazy good numbers. They just have to be around a little bit. The fish tend to react to them quite well. As you mentioned, the bionic ant, when in doubt for me, kind of April through about October, when in doubt, I throw a bionic ant. That one just works. There's always ants around anytime it's warm enough for the ants to be active. Fish love ants.
Yeah. I agree. But one question I was going to ask you is, you think of terrestrials, most people are thinking about some sort of permutation of a dry fly. But some people also like to fish them drowned. Do you ever do that?
Ever, yes, but not much. I've messed with some drowned hopper patterns over the years, but I've had pretty mixed, really, I shouldn't say mixed. I've had pretty poor results on subsurface terrestrials. Maybe a little bit more of sunken ants have been pretty good at times, but I don't fish them that much. Either way, but you could. I wouldn't hesitate to try it if you think they're getting submerged a lot. Why not, right?
Yeah, I have some sunken ant patterns that I also haven't had a lot of luck on, to be honest. But now hearing your comment about after the rain, I'm going to try them then and see if it changes.
Oh yeah, I've caught a few on sunken ants. I know our friend George Daniel. He's fished some sunken ants quite a bit before when I've been around him, and he definitely has caught quite a few fish on them. I have caught some fish on sunken ants. It just definitely has not become that's not a confidence fly for me. Not something I fish constantly. If you dug through my boxes, you might find 3 or 4 of them somewhere.
Okay, fair. What about the bug that causes a swimmer's itch? You ever fish that one?
No, is there a bug that causes swimmer's itch?
I don't know. It's like a bacteria or something.
Yeah, I think it's just a bacteria in the water. One thing I was going to mention about terrestrials that I think is overlooked is how important it is often to fish them shallower than you think and tighter to banks than you think. Ants and hoppers and crickets and things in particular, deadly along edges, even if it's just barely deep enough for fish to be hiding in there. If you think it's too shallow, it might just be perfect.
Crazy.
I catch lots and lots of my fish all summer long where I love throwing dries when I can, and all summer long throwing throwing an ant or a hopper. We should make one of those, a hant. Like the hopper ant.
Sick.
That's a new pattern we're just going to come up with. The hant pattern.
That's cool.
But fishing those super tight to the banks, and I mean bouncing off the blades of grass. It must be getting late because I can't talk anymore. Bouncing off the blades of grass. That was very difficult for me to say.
But is that like on a meadow stream, or is that also like on some sort of freestone?
No, that can be on freestones. It can be on tailwaters, meadow streams for sure. Right along rocks.
I fish that way at meadows, but I never tried on.
Or butting up against rocks. I find a lot of people when they're fishing terrestrials, especially late summer when the water's lower and the fish are, looking for those terrestrials, they hang right in front of rocks, and people throw like to the drop in of a riffle or something, and then they get the fly out about the time that it's going to become productive because they think they've given up on it. And they need to leave the fly in there right to the bitter end, right when it's going to spill over to the next little plunge. The fish will hang right in the tail out. I caught a lot of fish today in that same scenario, right as a faster current leads into a slower current. The current, loses speed, and then there will be a little foam line that leads right into a rock or something, and the fish are nestled right up in the front of that rock, and they nose up and eat the ant right before it drops into the next plunge.
That's good to know. That's a good one.
Good stuff.
Good one.
Good one to end on.
Yeah. Great spot to move on. And that's going to be it for this part 1 of Entomology. This is the Noob in the Knower podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you're digging the show, I know that we come in and out, intermittently. But if you are digging the show, please follow us on Instagram at the Noob in the Knower. That's all underscores in between every word. If there's a period in there, it's a scammer. Don't follow that account, or follow it, but it's the wrong account. If you've enjoyed the show, the best thing you can do is write a review on Apple Podcasts, or like us on Spotify, follow us on Spotify. We would really appreciate it. And if you think that you have friends that might enjoy the show, pass it on. It helps grow it, and we really appreciate it. It keeps us doing this time and time again. All right, guys, we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you. Actually, it's funny. I can't even wear like a normal watch because my wrists are like so small.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like every time I've gotten a couple watches through my life like as gifts, and I'm always like, oh, this thing's cool. And like, you know, at a certain point, like a big face watch came into style, and I'm like,
That's
I
not-
can't wear this because it's like the size of
If it's
my hand.
wider than your wrist, you probably shouldn't wear it.